what I love about the Tao is that it makes no claims except to common sense. It boils everything down to its rock-bottom fact. Tao means way. It's a spiritual system because it's a metaphor for the cosmos. It's a path, a process. It's the cosmos unfolding and enfolding. It's a concept. I want to just mention that science is a concept. Everything is a concept. It's not come from reason. It's come from all these little hints you've got and these suspicions that certain things are connected. And suddenly you make a leap in the dark and you come out with a theory. And that is your concept. And the proof of it is if it works. If all the examples fit it afterwards, then it works. That's what all concepts are like. And so, right, so the Tao, I haven't told you my theory, have I yet? My concept yet. But so it means it's the cosmos, a path. It's a concept, and it's broken down into its subdivisions. The 10,000 things that exist, I'm one of them, you're all one of them. Anyway, this is one of them. Yeah, the 10,000 things that exist, call that presence. And when they don't exist, call it absence. You couldn't get any more rock bottom than that. Nobody knows where life comes from. That's what the Tao says. The Chinese have a word. They call it self-ablaze. Comes from nowhere, it just appears, self-ablaze. Hinton calls it occurrence appearing of itself. Anyway, so now then. So some of the poems are also in this book. Some of those Tao poems are in this book. And I could now recite a Tao poem, which I will do. So it's, heaven goes on forever, earth endures forever. There is a reason heaven and earth go on enduring forever. Their life is not their own, so it goes on forever. Therefore, the sage, in putting himself last, puts himself first. And by, giving himself up, he protects himself. And then it says, what Aristotle and what I was saying is, if you're not free of yourself, how can you ever become yourself? My answer to how, if you're not free of yourself, is to follow your deep interest, as I've already said, and then you will forget yourself. Anyway, so what does that mean? The sage, by putting himself last, puts himself first. Well, I think it's this. The Tao have got an idea called nothing doing. And what that means is, it doesn't mean that they exactly do nothing, not at all. It means that they let life come to them. They're not ambitious, rushing all around trying to get advantage over people, climb up in their career of bureaucrats or anything. And so they wait for circumstances and things to come to them. And of course, they do go out reading poetry. They do go doing what I do, go to art galleries. You do that, but you're not pushing it. And so then you deal with everything. And you just, in the end, become yourself because you are dealing with your life as it comes past you. And you take it, you make use of it. And I like to think that the life that's going on forever, that I'm actually contributing to it. It's part of the Tao, it's part of the path. And so, whatever you do that's positive is becoming part of the spirit of the whole cosmos. That's how I like to think of it. And it's very comforting because you don't have to win every battle. And I just think, oh, Vivian, you know, don't worry about it. Your life is not your own. Just get on with it. Don't give yourself a hard time. Anyway, so it's really nice. Right, now, I wanted to, I know where I'm up to, but I think I've forgotten to tell you, yes, here we are, what the human dimension is. This is a concept that I have, you know, I'm trying out. I think it's okay. I don't know if it works. And so the human dimension is the concept. And the human dimension, it's how we live. It means we see the world in a certain way, and that is the world we live in. It's the world we're conscious of. We're not conscious of lots of things, but the world we live in is limited by what we're conscious of. Like all species, we have evolved together with the evolution of our talents. For example, our talents to make tools, and then because we can make tools, we can also make art. We've got spatial intelligence, we can make art. And the human dimension, our world, has expanded with us. We actually create it, that we actually create the world we live in. This is the theory. And just so you're clear about it, a bee doesn't make tools. A bee makes honey. And a bee lives in a bee dimension. And the world it sees, it doesn't look at flowers like we do. It sees flowers like a target with concentric circles of light going around them. I mean, that's something we don't do. Anyway, so that's what we mean by our talents. And we also make war, and that war is not a talent. War is an abuse of the human dimension, and it's a limit to its expansion. It's not human. It's not human nature to make war. It's the circumstances that have us make war, but it's more to do with the ethos of this terrible, aggressive, warlike political monotheism. Wars are fought for land, what's beneath the land, and cheap labour, and also now we've got to stop them from owning the airwaves. I've already mentioned that. So that is a concept of mine, and I got that concept when I read something in the book of poetry. And Hinton says, oh, I want to tell you, by the way, before I just tell you what he says, that at around 400 AD, what's it called, Christian era now, it's called, that's when these scholars who ran the government started to make poems of their own. And what happened is that some of them were rich. In fact, I can quote from the book. It says, the people who ran the government, this is who they were. They were an elite, a small elite, educated class of people who ran the government. And it says, from emperor and prime minister to lowly bureaucrat, from regional manor to monk to recluse in ancient mountains, they all wrote poetry, and they also did art or poetry as well. And these people, who they were, they had to pass an exam to run the government. I forgot to tell you that. And so it was a very arduous thing, and a lot of them came from quite rich families. But a lot of them were also poor, and if they passed this exam, then they became a bureaucrat who would help to run the government. And if they didn't like being a bureaucrat in the end, and they felt it was a treadmill, and they didn't want to be part of this rat race of people trying to get promotion and everything, and they either retired to their family home, which could be rich, or they just went somewhere and lived on nothing, really. And they wrote poetry. And the poetry was widely read by their colleagues, and they were incredibly respected. And this is one reason why China persisted for 4,000 years. It's the greatest civilization that ever was on this planet. And it persisted because these people ran the government, and also because of the actual Chinese characters themselves. I'd like to be able to find time to talk about that a little bit. It's really important, these characters. Bang, bang, bang. That's why the poems seemed like that, because they were made from these characters. Anyway, but that's another reason the Chinese characters kept the country all stable as well. Not really stable, but what I'm talking about is that they had a complete identity of culture throughout. That's it. And it was also the Tao that helped them. The Confucian ethic was good behavior. That's what Confucius is famous for. But underlying the good behavior is also the Tao ethic. And these poems are completely imbued with them. Right, so now then, I want to say that something I read in this book. I'm going to read out the whole thing, and then I'm going to tell you about it bit by bit. Consciousness, cosmos, and language form a unity, and in the remarkably creative act of reading a Chinese poem, we take part in this unity. We make it, filling absence with presence. And it says, empty mind there at the boundaries of its true wordless form. I just will deal with the first part of it first, which is consciousness, cosmos, and language form a unity. And I think I've been talking about that, and I'm going to read, it's in the poems. You can feel it and hear it and know it from the poems. And I will read another one more or less at the end of this, which really shows you that there is a unity between these things. But that's the bit that really, really excited me, to link these three words together. The Tao tells us that we've got the cosmos and that we're part of it and part of the flow. And also we know about consciousness, that nothing happens. It's what we're conscious of. This is our world. And how is that? And I just think the agent language linking those two things is really exciting. And so what really appealed to me about that anyway is that let me just find what I've written. That you only know something, an idea, nothing exists until it's named. Until something's named, you don't know what it is. This is why language is so important. We don't know it till it gets a name. Certainly you can't study anything until it's got a name. Think of Aristotle in the school of Plato, naming things, like that's a robin, it's a bird, and we'll call this one a robin, and that one, because it's got a red breast. In the country in England, they call it a ruddock, a robin, and the little brown hedge sparrow, they call a dunnock, because it's dark brown. So you have to give names to things. Even if it's a bird, you have to say what they are. And so Aristotle was doing this with Plato, probably, but definitely it was the school of Plato, which Aristotle was a pupil in at one point. And they were naming things, but also they were naming concepts, working out cause and effect and subdivisions of everything, dividing things into parts and naming the parts. And they're building ideas. And when you do this, you can start to pin down things. I think language, we're called Homo sapiens. I think we should be called Homo loquax, the talker. So, you know, because it's a much more active thing. You can't actually think if you weren't able to talk. Anyway, so he's talking specifically about this link of 3 things when you read a Chinese poem. I hope I've got time. I'm going to try to quickly tell you how the characters work. And so, I'll just tell you about one character, how it works first. Because you know that they're called ideographs or ideograms. You can choose whether you call it graph or gram. It both means pictures or writing. They're ideas made out of little pictures, and but made into symbols, very quick, you know, scribbles, calligraphy. And so one of the characters would be an oval with 2 or 3 little horizontal lines on top of the oval. And that is the character for a mouth speaking. And another character is, there's a line drawn, underneath the line is a hand pointing, scratch, scratch, scratch a hand, and on top of it is a little shoot, it's pointing at a shoot. And that means, it means temple or altar. And so what that it means that, so it's pointing at the sprout. Anyway, and then you can put so that means an altar or a temple. You put those 2 together and you have got another character with, on the right-hand side, one of them, and on the left-hand side, another of them, written smaller but put together. And that word means poetry.